start the new structure, 15th structure. In this 15th structure, let's learn a new structure, which is I promise not to. I promise not to plus V1 plus something. Here also we have to use the first form of the verb. Okay, I promise not to. Now let's see the usage of this structure. How we can use this structure. This structure is used to express to make a commitment or assurance that one will refrain from doing a specific action. What is the structure? The structure is used to express to make a commitment or assurance. To make a commitment or assurance that one will refrain from doing a specific action. Means refrain means to stop. To stop doing a specific action. Means we give assurance that you are not going to do that thing. You are not going to do that action. You are promising here that you are not going to commit or you are not going to do that action. Okay, so let's see some examples. I promise not to. After I promise not to, we have to use V1. We have to use V1. I promise not to interrupt you. I promise not to interrupt you. I promise not to be late. Late to the meeting. I promise not to forget your birthday. I promise not to eat. I promise not to eat all your cookies. I promise not to share your secrets. I promise not to make any more noise. I promise not to behave rude. I promise not to behave. Okay. I promise not to forget your adversary. Noise. Noise. Okay. Next. I promise not to forget watering these plants. Watering these plants. I promise not to be I promise not to make any more mistakes. I promise not to be too hard. I promise not to be too hard. I promise not to waste your time. I promise not to criticize you. I promise not to criticize you. I promise not to break. I promise not to break your promise. I promise not to overthink. I promise not to overthink. I promise not to judge you. I promise not to take anything from you. I promise not to forget. I promise not to forget pay the bills. I promise not to neglect my health. I promise not to neglect my health. I promise not to lose my temper. I promise not to skip. I promise not to skip anything. I promise not to let fear. I promise not to give up in the middle. Okay, thank you. Let's meet in the next session.